Hello there, Homeschool Nolan here to help you navigate learning in the digital age. Today I'd like to talk about teaching Chinese history to kids, starting with the first emperor of China. Why this topic? Well, China's been in the news a lot lately, and if current trends continue, I believe our children will grow up in a world where China and the United States increasingly compete for global leadership, economically, technologically, and perhaps even militarily. But many Americans continue to misunderstand China. They're disappointed when China behaves in ways contrary to Western expectations. But this shouldn't be a surprise given how so few of us in America have ever studied Chinese history in school. And that's why I believe children today should begin studying Chinese history, so they can better understand the world that they're likely to grow up in. But to understand China today, you must first have knowledge of its past. And a good place to start is with the first emperor of China. The first emperor of China was a man by the name of Qin Shi Huang. Probably not a household name, but you probably do know him by the famous Terracotta Army that was discovered near his tomb, or the Great Wall that he had built to protect China from the barbarians. But as long-lasting as those creations were, his greatest impact on the world was the creation of a unified country that we know today as China. Now, China has always been a very large country, but before he unified it in 221 BC, China was a civilization broken up into multiple states. The period from 475 to 221 BC was known as the Warring States period, where 7 states continually clashed against one another on the battlefield. But then, in 246 BC, a young prince took the throne of one of the states called Qin, and through sheer force of will, he overpowered and conquered the other 6 states, and in 221 BC, for the very first time in history, he unified all of China. This young ruler renamed himself Qin Shi Huang, meaning the first emperor of China. And although his dynasty only lasted for about 14 years, the impact of his first dynasty is still felt in China and the world today. In creating such a large country, the first emperor created a highly centralized state that was ruled from the top down. Except for a few interruptions, it was a dynastic system of government that would last for over 2,000 years. And China today continues to be ruled as a centralized state from the top down. But instead of being ruled by one family, it is instead ruled by one party. And the founder of this party, Mao Zedong, once described himself as a mixture of both Karl Marx and the first emperor. Now, the first emperor didn't just use force and violence to unify his country. Once in power, his other great achievement was putting in place one written language that we commonly refer today as Chinese. To appreciate this, realize that there's never really been a spoken language called Chinese. The official dialect of China is actually Mandarin or Putonghua. Cantonese is another major dialect. In fact, there are over 200 spoken languages in China. So it's quite amazing that with all the different tribes and ethnic groups speaking different dialects, they're all united by just one written language. And we have the first emperor to thank for that. In addition to language, the first emperor introduced many other reforms that are still felt today. He introduced coins that would be used throughout the empire. No more states creating their own money. He instituted standard weights and measures to make it easier for merchants to trade with one another. He even standardized the roads and the width of carts to make travel throughout his empire easier. All of these reforms helped create a stable, unified country ruled from the top down. Due in large part to the first emperor, China would emerge as the world's preeminent civilization for the next 2,000 years. But it's important to note that the first emperor's achievements were not without costs. Qin Shi Huang was also a ruthless ruler. He brutally executed tens of thousands of captured prisoners. He had hundreds of scholars and historians who disagreed with him buried alive. He enslaved hundreds of thousands of men to build the Great Wall and his mausoleum. And when he died, he had hundreds of concubines, servants, and engineers buried with him in his tomb. A cruel and violent death was the likely penalty for anyone who dared to defy him. I bring this up because it makes us wonder, would he have succeeded in his great accomplishments had he not also used fear and the threat of violence? And is it possible today to govern China as a centralized state without at least some fear or show of force? These are questions that both China and the world are still asking today. Now, as I said earlier, I think kids today should study and learn about Chinese history, given China's growing influence in the world. But it can be challenging to find good materials written in English for kids. But one surprisingly good introduction I found was Where is the Great Wall from the Who HQ series. Even though the title is about the Great Wall, most of the book is actually about ancient China and the first emperor who started building the Great Wall. It also includes a nice map and some photos of the Great Wall in China. I also found it a good read for adults looking for an easy-to-read introduction to Chinese history. I put a link to the book in the notes below. But regardless of which book you choose, I think you will be fascinated studying the first emperor. You will find that he was indeed perhaps the most consequential ruler of the ancient world, more so than men such as Julius Caesar or Alexander the Great. For not only did he conquer vast lands, but he also unified a large country that is still exerting its influence on the world today. And I hope you enjoyed learning more about this fascinating ruler. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.